Hello. I wanted to give some quick general tips on the subject of improvisation and getting a skill ready for improvisation, or skill up to the level where you can improvise with that skill or that topic or that concept. I've been wanting to make this video or just talk about this for a little while as it relates to the program that I assume, if you're seeing this video, you're in my correspondence program. Now I'm calling it more the hybrid program, or wherever I'm going to call it next year. But the nature of this program is often that I'll have you send videos of yourself doing something, and then if it's good enough, we move on to the next thing. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, and I guess clarify or give some extra insight that let's say, a lot of you have done similar things with shell voicings, for example, where we try to play through tunes with shell voicings, then maybe add a note to those, then add another note and do them without the root. And I'll often have you doing it, I'll say do it for this tune or do it at this tempo, that kind of thing. And then we'll move on when I'm like, all right, you look comfortable enough. And that is what we've been doing, a lot of different things, soloing or whatever. It's just the basic idea. But I wanted to say specifically that to get something at a level where you can improvise with it is a bit of a different thing, right? Like if you can record a few videos of yourself, with a lot of practice, being able to play the shell voicings for a tune, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can then hop up on a gig, have somebody open up the real book or new lead sheets or whatever, and have you just play through it with the shell voicings in tempo and interacting with the band and everything, and have that go great. What I'm not saying, I want to be careful that I'm not saying spend more time on it, because I think I've probably been pretty clear with all of you that I think most people's tendency is to get into a rabbit hole with one thing and maybe stay on it too long, or think, at least, I don't know, maybe it's just the students that are attracted to this program often, might get in that, headspace of trying to spend too long on just one thing. So I'm not saying I spend more time on it, but more that I want to point out that to be able to improvise with it is different. So I'd encourage you to think of it like this. I'm trying to show you how to solve the problem, right? So let's say if we're talking about shell voicings with a note added, I want you to show me, in most cases I want you to show me that you get okay, if that's the chord progression, and then I can do the harmonic analysis, and I can figure out, what would be the conventional tensions referencing Jake's sheet, what would be where I might use a 9 and where a flat 9 would be okay and where it wouldn't be okay, that kind of thing, that you kind of get that well enough that you can put it together. And then if you're in a context where you really are going to be performing with that, or you just like it and want to be able to perform with it for a practical musical context, not just because you're interested, that's kind of a separate thing, then you have that foundation to work with, and then can get more specific in what you repeat for your practice. So let's take an example, is that let's say you do get a gig, and it's let's say a quartet gig. Those drums, and I'm saying this not just to my jazz students, but I think you'll get the principle. So let's say it's drums, bass, you are the guitar, and a horn, right? So in that context, you might need to get real comfortable with voicings that are in a good register to support the saxophonist, but don't get in the bassist's way. So then you've got a specific context where you might want to dig into one skill more so that you can then have comfort improvising with it, Now, if you aren't in that context, maybe you're doing more solo guitar gigs or duos, then the need to work on that specific skill might just might not be there. I mean, there's only so many things we can work on, right, at a time. So there's certain, foundation things I give everybody that I'm like, you kind of need to have this before you do this other thing. But then you might find that, okay, I'm about to perform, or I have this regular gig, or this music that I'm writing requires this certain skill, that kind of stuff. And you'll need to like hone in and get these things up to a point where you can't, it's not just that you can work out a set of voicings and then just play that voicings with one rhythm, throughout the whole song, but that you have comfort with it and can vary it. With improvisation, I think practicing a skill for improvisation, involves a lot of repetition. And think about levers of difficulty. As we go through stages on a different topic, like chord voicings or scales or improvising over a standard or finger picking or whatever we're doing, it's likely that if we're spending a decent amount of time on it, I'm like, okay, let's do it like this and then let's add this other restriction, or let's add this other thing that makes it a little bit harder. That was too tricky, let's do this other thing that's a little simpler. And I want you guys to, you people, to be thinking in that way when you're approaching any kind of practice problem, because I think it's sort of the best way to think about things. Let's say there's something you want to be able to improvise with because you actually have a performance context for it. Then, pick your tempo and pick your challenge. And if you're doing something where you're like, man, I cannot improvise with this at all. I cannot just like do these voicings on the fly for this tune at this tempo. Then think about it. You can practice it at a slower tempo. You can use a simpler voicing structure. You can, maybe compose some, voicings that you're going to use, and then start branching out and look for ways you can vary those. But you sort of want to be honest with yourself, like, can I improvise with this concept? And this is a problem that I have a lot, where I really can get stuck because I'm like, okay, I'm working on this thing, and I just can't do it. And sometimes I'm smart and I'm like, well, let's break it down. What are the various elements of this that can, get me to that point where I can do it? And sometimes I just keep muscling through. And I gotta say that I've spent, I've practiced a lot of guitar in my life, and I've spent a lot of time muscling through things, and it just is a real waste. And it's physically taxing, it's mentally exhausting, and you get like, something I think isn't talked about enough is that like, it can be, if you really care about this stuff, it can be really, it can have a lot of emotional weight to be failing. Like, it can be really tough, for me at least, So you don't want that. We don't want to be, spending 2 hours doing something that we just can't do at all, right? Make it easier, figure out some way to make it happen, Even if it's something you have to do for a gig, there might be a way you can just, start with an easier stage of it. And that's why, for a lot of you if you've kind of started from scratch-ish with jazz stuff, I'm like, okay, let's play these tunes, like, let's do that first, because it's real hard to do the fancier stuff if we can't do that first, And sometimes, like, at a gig, there's nothing wrong with doing that, because it's better to do that and have it be presented nice. It's just like, all right, that's kind of boring, that's fine. Than to be like, and just be struggling and nothing's in time, So then taking things a step further, if you can be patient and self-aware in your improvisation, you can be working on these things and be like, all right, this is going smooth. Oh, that one spot really trips me up. And then, you drill that one spot more, and you take the same kind of like, what can I do? What can't I do? What are the things that can bridge the gap? In terms of improvisation, because it takes a lot of repetition, and you gotta see like, what am I comfortable enough with that I can kind of just do it, and what takes so much thought that, it's not happening in real time. Similarly, speaking of real time, it's good to be aware that whatever challenge you're giving yourself in the practice room, once you're playing with other people, or even if you're playing solo and you're playing in front of an audience, everything's going to feel like about 20% harder, especially, well, yeah, so I was gonna say, especially if, you know, you don't perform that regularly. The more regularly you perform, the lower that percentage is. So like, let's say you're working on a tune and you get real comfortable at a certain tempo with it, or some activity. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be an etude or an improvisation activity or switching chord voicings. Then you got to keep in mind that when you're playing with people, you might not be able to do it quite at that tempo. So it makes sense to push tempos and push yourself a bit and see, you know, what really have a good sense of what is doable in time and what is not. And I think that was pretty much all I wanted to say. I really wanted to stress that I know that sometimes we're working on improvisation-related skills, but since the nature of this program, the format of it is that we're not sitting down improvising together, that these are the kind of things to be doing on your own for specific things that you're like, all right, I really want to be able to play with this, like now or tonight or this week or something. I want to be able to improvise with this. Because especially I think about chord voicings a lot for this, because it's, you know, there's such a big difference between, and for myself included, there's such a big difference between the voicings that I can sit down and map out and like compose versus what I can just do on the fly. You can, you know, you can bet that the stuff that I'm improvising with is going to be a lot less hip and intricate than the things that I can sit down and map out, you know, and problem solve with. Yeah, so I hope that's clear. I really want that distinction to be in there, so that you're not like, you know, just going through all this stuff and then you're not surprised when then you kind of sit and play with somebody else and, you know, you're having trouble kind of just reading through a new chart or doing whatever, because the improvisation part, you know, it takes time. Oh yeah, I did want to add, sorry to ramble, but just, you know, just a bunch of food for thought in here. That you can decide like what level you want something to be at, you know? Like, let me use myself as an example. What's like I'm just trying to think of some particularly challenging thing. Oh, actually, this is a really good example. If I was improvising over this is where I'm at with something. If I'm improvising over a standard in an odd time signature, just an example. You know, with just where I'm at with it, you know, could play in like a 7/8 or some weird thing over a tricky tune if the backing track or the people I'm playing with are being pretty obvious about where the beat is. If I was playing over a tune like Stablemates in 7 and the rhythm section was having like a lot of fun with it and implying all this other stuff, I can say right now, I'm not, you know, too proud to admit or whatever, that I'm not gonna make it. You know, if I was sitting with like Ari Honegg, and, you know, he just starts playing Stablemates in 7, and doing all these weird tuplet thingies over 7/8, I'm lost, you know, I'm not gonna do it. But I know that if it's a moderate tempo and the drums are going, you know, do, get, you know, then I'll be all right. So in my practice, that's a thing that if I were, this is a really good example actually, because if I were like, oh, I really want to be able to perform that, I don't really care that much about being able to perform that. I'm not getting called to gig with Ari Honegg. But if I did, then the kind of things I would work on would be maybe like making backing tracks or making like drum beats to play along with that have varying degrees of obviousness. Maybe, you know, at first it's that one bar repeating, then maybe it's a second bar that like leaves out one of the bass hits, you know, like a 2-bar phrase. You get where I'm going with this? You know, if it's a 4-bar phrase that has more variation and so on, and then it could be like an 8-bar phrase that does some quirky things in there that I know when I'm in the thick of it harmonically, I'm not gonna be able to, I'll have a harder time hanging on. That's probably how I would work on that. And I would keep improvising, and I would, you know, pay attention to where it starts to fall apart. And keeping in mind other variables too. I mean, sorry for all the detail, but I think it's a really good way to think of things. Like, if I'm playing over that and I'm playing rhythms for me that are, relatively simple or locked in with the backing, then that's going to be easier than if I start floating over it and trying to play more syncopated over the bar line things, Just be mindful of your variables when you're trying to work on this stuff, and that can really help you build your skills and not just be banging your head against the wall because you're just playing something that's super easy for you, or you're doing something that's way out of your depth and you just keep on, again, banging your head against the wall. And I said I still think that's a really good example, that odd time signature thing, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with what you're working on, what you personally are working on, because if I wanted to perform that stuff, that's what I would do. If I had some important performance that I need to get ready for, then that, or a regular gig with a drummer who plays like that, that's what I would work on. But since I don't look at that. This is really important. I don't look at that these days and go, shoot, that's something I really should work on. I'm such a bad guitarist because I can't do that. I can do it when the drums are obvious, when the beat one is obvious, but I can't. It's like, yeah, that's true, but I don't make it a value judgment because it's not something that I really care about performing. So that's, where we have to sort of choose our practice battles wisely, I know I'm a little rambly on this, but I think you'd rather just get it than wait for me to edit this stuff because I would never send it. True facts. So let me know if any questions. I just thought that was an important thing to get out there.